so we can post this on the website for the future, so people who weren't able to attend can look that up. And with that, I will hand it off to Cale Gullett. I believe Cale is presenting first, and then Jerry Shows will be after him. And hold on, I just need to make them presenters. All right, Cale, it should be your screen showing now.
Show Terry, show mine. I'm going to be presenting first.
Oh, okay, got it. Sorry, I got the order mixed up. Put you on there.
Okay. But also, Tom wants to say a few words.
Yep. Oh, yeah. Sorry, Tom. I forgot. Tom wanted to say a few words first.
All right. Thanks, Terry. Hey, I just wanted to maybe open this up as we really talk about my vision for Montana with Montana Focused Conservations. We've started down this road nearly 6 months ago of internally trying to get our house in order on what this would look like, where we should go. We certainly don't have all of the answers. That this is a work in progress. So I think to all the partners that are out there today that are either first hearing about this or wanting to get more information, I'm certainly encouraged. What you're going to hear today is a presentation on what long-range planning, at least from the NRCS perspective, is, and then more importantly about what Montana Focused Conservation and how long-range plans and targeted implementation plans tie into that process. So what I would encourage you, all of you, please engage with us, engage with me, engage with Cale and Jerry, whether it's this session or it's afterwards. I am not going to be able to participate the whole 2 hours. I'm actually in Ekalaka today, just dialing in and I am trying to get around the state to visit a few field offices, but I'm going to hang in here for a while. And but beyond that, I really do encourage engagement by all of you. If you have questions, and don't hesitate to let us know, and we'll work through what we believe this is going to look like, how it's going to roll out. Currently, we're looking at this fiscal year 19 as a transition year. We have started down this road, but we are also doing business like we've done business in the past. With the plan in next year is to move in this direction. So on that note, I think I'll turn it over. I think I heard Jerry say he's going to start, and I very much appreciate everybody's interest. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. I'll introduce myself. I'm Jerry Shows. I'm the Assistant State Conservationist for Programs, FA here in the state office. That's EQIP program, CSP program. I deal with some aspects of our Regional Conservationist Partnership Program, RCPP, also Conservation Innovative Grants as well. But just want to reiterate, and you'll hear me say this probably a couple of times through this presentation, that Montana Focused Conservation is EQIP centric. We're going to use this specifically for our EQIP funds and for our EQIP program. And I'm thankful to be able to share this with you today. I want to thank Montana Watershed Coordination Council and Terry Nichols for setting all this up and giving us the opportunity to present Montana Focused Conservation to a larger audience and to help get the word out as to what the pathway that we're going to take moving forward as far as EQIP funds go within the state of Montana. And so we're going to change how we do deliver our technical and financial assistance. It's just in the delivery of it. We're still the Natural Resources Conservation Service. We still are an agency that is not regulatory but voluntary, and work with all of our partners and our producers and program participants on a voluntary basis. And As such, we are limited, as most of you I know are as well, in dollars and in also staff that we have to use to meet the needs and to actually implement the Farm Bill as we're charged, these programs as we're charged to do in the Farm Bill. And so based off of that, we're going to change the way that we invest our dollars and change the way that we decide where our technical assistants, our folks, are going to be working at. And so we're going to do that based off of clearly defined natural resource goals that have been identified by you, the local landowners, and our local partners through a process that we call our locally led process. We're not going to leave partners out. We want to embrace partners. We're hoping this is actually going to broaden our work and scope of working with partners. We want to collaborate with you on a locally led basis to help strategically focus our work on the landscape and on the highest resource priorities that are out there, and have those identified by our partners and by our local producers at the local level. By identifying these locally developed priorities and goals and the investments needed to address these, we hope that we can effectively leverage and strategically deliver our technical and financial assistance. Once again, we have a limited amount of resources, we have a limited amount of folks, and we want to make sure that we target our efforts, our people, and our dollars in a way that we will get the most bang for our buck, and also be able to accomplish something in that conservation arena in a locally led environment. And so what are the benefits of Montana-focused conservation? Collectively focusing our expertise and resources on the highest priority resource concerns and the highest priority areas. We think that it'll yield the best results for our investment and help us, and you'll hear Tom as you talk to him or hear him talk in the future, talks about moving the needle. We want to be able to make a difference and impact in an area that has a high priority resource concern that they would like to treat through this Montana focused conservation effort. Another benefit is based on funding and support from other agencies and or groups can be leveraged and coordinated to focus on mutual issues of high priority. So we want to take our dollars, combine them with dollars from partners or other non-governmental organizations such as Trout Unlimited, Ducks Unlimited, Pheasants Forever, just to name a few, to help us be able to focus on those high priorities, get those leveraged dollars in there, and be able to move the needle even more because it's a concerted effort between mutual interests. Another benefit is it gives us guidance to our employees and to also you as partners as to where we're going and what we're going to be working on in the future. And then not only that, but also how we're going to be or go about getting there. It also clearly identifies the resources necessary to carry out the work when these long-range plans are developed and these targeted implementation plans are developed. One of the things that we ask for in those is what kind of manpower do you need in order to be able to treat the resource concern that's been identified? And so it provides a solid basis for us to be able to request funding and assistance from a variety of sources, including our own at national headquarters, to be able to go back and ask for more or additional EQIP dollars there as well. Also, this shifts our efforts to address resource concerns. This shifted effort should allow us at the state office and also at the area office to be more responsive to being able to support our field offices and our area office staff. And it provides an opportunity for us to build and organize an even stronger support structure to be able to implement conservation at the local level. This strategy will give us the information that we need also to be able to tell the story of what we've accomplished. One of our things that we talk about regularly here with the NRCS is that we do great work and we work with great people. But so many times, if you were to walk down any main street, probably in any town, and ask somebody who the Natural Resource Conservation Service was, you might run across several folks that don't even know who we are or know what we do. And so with us having these focused conservation efforts in these local areas, it'll give us the ability to tell a story of what we've done and what we've been able to accomplish through conservation efforts, working with local producers on that landscape. And also be able to tell and help tell the story of what our partners have done as well. So it gives us that ability to be able to tell our story to multiple people, because we have a story to tell that's focused in scope and also has some defined outcomes as to what we've accomplished while we've been there working in this focused effort. And so how do we deliver this approach? The way we deliver this through our local field offices, like we always have. We're asking our local field offices, not the conservation districts, not our partners, to develop their vision, the district conservationist vision for natural resource conservation through a long-range plan there in that field office. Now, he's not supposed to do that in a vacuum. He's supposed to do that with collaboration with our partners. And so that's one of the ways we're going to be able to deliver this focused conservation, is by having our field office staff develop a long-range plan and do so with input from our partners. And they're also going to take priority resource concerns that are identified in the long-range plan, and the field office staff will work with our partners to determine the specific goals and outcomes for a project area. So not only are they going to develop a long-range plan, we're asking them to develop a targeted implementation plan as well, with a direct line of sight back to that long-range plan. The long-range plan, as Cale will tell you when he gets to his portion of this program, it's a plan that's developed for over a 5-year period, and we take our targeted implementation plans and we tie back to resource concerns identified in that long-range plan, and that's where our targeted implementation plans are developed from. Pretty much I already covered that one before I even got to the slide. The approved targeted implementation plans will then be taken, and we will use those to help us develop our budget for EQIP, identifying where we in Montana will invest our staff and our financial resources in a strategic approach. Now, one thing I want to maybe offer a little bit of clarification here. This is dealing strictly with EQIP, and this is not all of our EQIP dollars that we'll be doing that with. There are money, and I'll explain this as I get a little bit further into my part of the program. We get dollars from national headquarters that are mandated that we have to use in specific pots or specific spots, whatever you want to call those. And so it won't be all of our EQIP funds going to this Montana focused conservation effort, but it will be some of it, but it won't be all. And so all of our state managed financial assistance funds will have a direct link and strictly equipped to a long range plan and an improved targeted implementation plan that has a strategy to deal with a specific resource concern in a specific geographic location. Local partners, including our local conservation districts, watershed councils, state and local agencies, are just a few of the members across Montana who we will want to help contribute significantly to this effort. And so we're committed to continual improvement of this focused approach. We're just getting started in it. As Tom said, this is a transition year. And so we're going to do so with an ongoing discussion with a strategic team that we have set up that has folks on it from the state leadership team here at the state office, area office staff, and also field office staff. And so that's how we're going to deliver this approach. Hopefully, I've mentioned a couple of things that we're going to use to do that with, one of them being a long range plan and the other being a targeted implementation plan. And Cale's shop, the technology area here in our state office, is taking the lead on the long range plan. And so I'll turn it over to Cale for him to discuss what a long range plan is and how that's going to help us with this Montana focused conservation effort.
Okay, I think I need to switch over the presenters here to Cale if you're all done. Thank you very much, Jerry. Let me see.
Thank you. You'll be coming back. You'll be coming back to me when Cale gets through with the long range plan, Terry.
Okay, that sounds good. I think we just can only have one presenter at a time. So.
Right, I understand.
Yep. Great. All right, Cale, we should be showing your screen now, but.
Okay, I'm gonna go off mute here.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Hang on one second. I'm not seeing are folks seeing?
No.
Hold on. I'm working on it.
Oh, there we go. We got it. Great. Okay. Thanks, Jerry. And now we'll pass it over to Cale.
All right, we should be good to go. Any questions? Can you mute that? Regarding what Jerry or Tom's introductory material went through?
Okay, I haven't seen any questions in the chat box.
No?
Guess we must be good.
All right. Well, I'll get going. I'll just echo Jerry's thanks to the Watershed Coordination Council for setting this up, and for the folks that have dialed in and linked in today. We really appreciate your time. Appreciate the opportunity to be able to provide some commentary on this this new thing here in Montana. And it's definitely something that we're figuring out as we go, and we appreciate all the input that we can get. And it's exciting as well. It's definitely here at the beginning, we've come across a few things that have really been situations where you go, yeah, we need to figure something out regarding that. So we know quite a few things, we don't know a few things, and we're definitely learning and working on it as we go. So,
actually, Cale, I did.
Actually, I've attended and delivered enough webinars to know that sometimes people like to put a face with a voice. And as a state office technical person, I don't get out of the office as often as I'd like. And I know there are people on the line today that I haven't met. So I've been with NRCS Montana as a state resource conservationist since August of 2014. Prior to that, represented the department as science lead in the Deepwater Horizon case, was the NRCS East Region fisheries ecologist, worked some ESA issues for the National Marine Fisheries Service in Washington State, and started out my career out of the University of Wyoming working for the Yakima Nation in Washington State. So that's a little bit about me. Let's just jump right into this long-range plan thing that's in direct support of Montana-focused conservation.
And hey, Cale, this is Terry. I just want to.
Right. So we're going to be seeing a few acronyms. We'll be talking in acronyms. Every agency's got them. I just wanted to cover a few of the real critical ones here. MFC, of course, Montana Focused Conservation. LRPs are the long-range plans. TIPs, Jerry's already alluded to these, are targeted implementation plans, and then LWGs are local working groups, which is an artifact of our conservation delivery mechanism that's been in place for quite some time and will be even more important as we go forward. I'm not sure if the line's open for questions, but I'd just like to say that if you have them, jump in and ask if you hear something that doesn't make sense. You can also use the chat box and send questions to either me or the meeting organizer, and of course they can queue up there and we can go through them at the end if need be.
Yeah,
Cale,
can you hear me?
Hopefully
This is Terry.
Yesterday afternoon that Terry had sent out an email with an attachment. That attachment was a single PDF that included at the beginning a bulletin, which is a formal instrument of policy and guidance delivery that NRCS uses as well. At the back is the copy of Montana's long-range planning template version 1.0.
Okay.
Now this was all made formal on February 22nd of this year, and we refer to it as a template, but at the same time, it's a suggested outline that attempts to capture the major themes and content we think are needed to set the stage for focused conservation. Since we're just getting started with this new approach to conservation delivery in Montana, we wanted to provide a basic structure, but emphasize that this structure isn't intended to squash creativity. We hope this outline helps kickstart the process, gives our staff something to get started with at the local working group level, and aids the production of long-range plans for every county in Montana. Another hope is that there will be revisions, tweaks to the structure that better fit how things work in this state and better describe conditions and conservation opportunities as we go along. And as conservation is applied and resource concerns are addressed in planning areas, these long-range plans are going to need to be revised iteratively to capture success and describe future focus areas. An important point here, and Jerry and I will probably hit on things individually, they're the same, but if we both find it necessary to talk about them, they're important. Montana-focused conservation, the development of long-range plans, future revisions of those plans is going to be as locally led and collaborative as anything we've done in the past. We have a new vehicle for conservation delivery, but the folks on the bus are the same. Their input is as vital now as ever, and we expect to travel this road together. So you should all have a copy. I referred to this PDF you were sent, and the template at the back. You know, I'll be covering that template here as we go along, and it might be helpful to look at it if you can. So it might be helpful to have in front of you. Maybe provoke some questions as well.
Hey, Kale, can you hear me? This is Terry.
Well, our long-range template is comprised of 6 sections, but I'll be covering the first 5. Section 6, shown here, is targeted implementation plans and investment portfolios. That'll be addressed later on by Jerry after I get through the major components of the long-range planning piece. Now, for many people on the call, I'd guess large-scale planning is nothing new. I visited the MWCC website yesterday, and this Clark Fork and Kootenai River Basin's water plan was front and center. The document uses a 6-section outline, and while specifically concerned with managing water within the natural, social, legal constraints of the basins, it sets out a structure into which these issues can be presented and analyzed to reach certain goals. And our LRP template is very similar. It has a broader focus on natural resources to include water, and will address conditions and opportunities within each county of Montana. So there's similar themes, different boundary conditions. All right, here we go. Let me see, we got some questions coming up here. I'm gonna have to open this up. All right. Bear with me here. We'll go up to the beginning here after the sound check. Robert Ray is asking about timeline for tips and long-range plans. Robert, I'll get to that. Chris Evans, Jerry said something about this will change how they provide technical assistance. Will this change how people who walk in the field office door looking for CTA are responded to?
No.
No, we don't. We have a no there. And will field office staff still be able to assist those folks?
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. What do you got? Okay, got it. Thank you. We've got a number of different media inputs coming here. Could the long-range planning template be sent to everyone on the call? Yes, Rebecca, I'd assume that we could square up the list of attendees with the list that Terry was using to announce the call and make sure, that everybody gets the material that was sent out yesterday.
Yeah.
Another question from Robert Ray. One plan for each county, not watershed based. Well, it's an interesting question from Robert Ray. Robert, you make a good point. The county-based approach allows us to better use the personnel that we have in place. The hope is that where watershed issues transcend county boundaries, that the long-range plans will be consistent and capture, the issues in the same way. All right, we know that resource concerns and, problems don't just stop at the county line. So it's a good question. We had to make a call on some sort of boundary to start this with, and honestly, with local working group structure, with our personnel in the field offices across the state, that's our first best approach to getting something that we can get our hands around, and start putting some stuff on paper. Okay, what do we got? I think that's about it. All right, so I am going to scroll back up and make sure that all those questions have been addressed. And thank you. We can send out, and Terry is saying we can send out the long-range planning template to everyone after the webinar is over. All right, I think that we have addressed what we had in the chat queue. So I'm going to keep going. And again, just keep typing those in there, and I'll try to keep an eye on that dialog box. And if something pops up, then I'll stop and take a look. All right. Okie doke. So section 1 of that template sets forth the introduction to the plan. And here we hope to set out the vision and mission for the county, enumerate the goals, objectives, strategies, and tactics that will be addressed and utilized in the plan to define resource problems and fix them. As you might imagine, locally facilitated meetings will be essential to engage partners and the general public, and this section will identify the folks who took part in the development of the long-range plan. This cast of supporting characters will most likely change over time as focused conservation matures and new partners in some counties come on board. So importantly, the introduction will specify the time frame covered by the planning document. Back in September, when Tom Watson first started us down this path, he told every district conservation in the state, really warned them, that when he visits, he expects them all to be able to answer the following question, and that is, what will your county look like 5 years from now? I'm sure that every DC in the room had an idea at that time, but filling in that picture and putting some specifics to a set of general ideas will occur as they each, with the help of the local partners, draft long-range plans. I see we have another question that came up here. Will Seeley, how will these plans be developed for tribes? Will they be developed for the counties or to the specific tribal nations? That's a good question. I don't know. Have you run into that one, Jerry, when it comes to specific, or is it separate tribal long-range plans, or are we going to do tribal needs as represented by the counties for which the reservation covers, or has that come up in your travels about the state?
It has. The way that works is we set aside a certain portion of our EQIP funding specifically for the tribes, and then that pot of money specifically for tribes won't be used for these tips at all. But the tribes do have the opportunity to develop a tip. They don't necessarily need to develop a long-range plan. I know most of the tribes in Montana either have an ARMP, Agri-Resource Management Plan, or are working to develop one currently. And so if they want to develop a targeted implementation plan and put that forward to seek funding through that mechanism, they can do so as long as it does tie back to some type of planning document, whether it be an ARMP or some other type of document that tribe has. So yes, they can do targeted implementation plans as well.
Yeah, and I think the pat answer is going to be for whatever planning document, and in our case, long-range plans, sets the stage for the investment vehicles. The targeted implementation plans, there just has to be that clear line of sight, right? Where you have a tip that addresses a resource problem, yes, that's quantified, identified, and quantified in a long-range plan, whether that's LRPs or ARMPs. I think we're working with different acronyms, but generally in the same idea.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, I hope that answers your question. If it didn't, just ding back into the dialogue box. Chris Evans is asking, so to clarify, the only EQIP money that will be available in the counties will either be for a tip or in one of the other funding pots, like pollinator.
Yes, and I'll explain some of that further as we get further into the presentation.
The money. Yeah, we'll get into that a little bit further. So if we don't, dialogue box it out and we'll figure this out. So, all right, I'll close that down, get back into this thing. And second section of our template. Section 2 brings this natural resource inventory into the plan. Here we should describe the baseline condition of all the human, soil, water, air, energy, plant, and animal resources in the county. So developing this section of the long-range plan should start with compiling all the planning work that's been done across the county in the past, water management plans, activities or efforts done under 319, conservation district long-range plans, ecological site descriptions. Anything descriptive of the natural resources of the county is fair game. Further, plagiarism is encouraged and expected. We believe we say there's no need to reinvent the wheel, And the long-range planning process is in no way intended to result in pages of original text, especially the inventory part. A lot of good material is out there. We've encouraged our staff in the field offices to start collecting everything they can get their hands on. I've asked my staff here in Bozeman also to start collecting anything that might be useful, and we're packing a SharePoint site here in the state office with those kinds of materials. Let's see. Oh, well, good. Seems like the question took care of itself, so I'm going to move on here. And yeah, so for the Watershed groups on the phone, this is a primary opportunity for you to swoop in and help us. Please let your local folks know if you've got any existing documents that are, they don't have to be complete. We're looking for descriptive stuff here. There's a lot of really good assets that I think are very, very well suited to the inventory section here, as well as the other portions of the template that I'll talk about here in a bit. And we, again, as I said, collaborative, we need all the help we can get. So if you take a look at the copy of your template, you'll see that each of the major subject headings in this slide, human, soil, water, etc., is further fleshed out with suggested subcategories to address in the plan. For example, the human piece includes land cover, land use and ownership, farm and census data, ag statistics, forest ownership and production. Water includes annual precipitation, surface and groundwater resources, irrigation, other out-of-stream uses, etc. Plants and animals, we're talking about key species on the landscape, conservation areas in the county, livestock use, invasive species issues, and on and on and on. So each major category really should be expanded to detail the resource conditions that are relevant to the county, especially the ones that you're going to target down the road for trying to fix. So in summary, this section 2 should provide a resource condition and demographic narrative of conditions in the county, and it tells the story of what's happening out there right now. So for those of you that may attend future local working group meetings where long-range planning is front and center, you will likely see some large laminated maps like this one. We've had them laminated so that they can be drawn on for discussion purposes. Not everything is going to be done digitally. Sometimes it really helps to take something and mark it up and really talk about what's going on here and what should go on there and here. So in addition, again, this section 2 is we need to describe the location and extent of agriculture, crop types, animal feeding operations, grazing, water resource conditions, engaging locations, how water gets into those systems, riparian conditions, the status and extent of any interesting animals out there, as well as past events that might have had a lasting effect on the landscape. And aside from all the ology kind of stuff, a description of the demographics of the folks that live and work in the county. Local working group sessions should be a great opportunity to revisit the status of the county, talk about what's going on, and provide an inventory that reflects the resource setting supported by the best available information. All right, section 3, here's where we're looking to get an analysis of conservation activity that's occurred across the county in the past 5 or 10 years. While NRCS data are out there to provide a picture of the type and extent of conservation we've worked with producers to apply in the past, we also need partner efforts and other data that describe actions or funding that have affected the natural resource baseline in the county. This portion of the long-range plan should define the scope and extent of conservation accomplishments in the county, as well as resource concerns that remain unaddressed for one reason or many. Finally, unaddressed resource concerns should be enumerated and targeted for NRCS investment under focused conservation. And this will kind of make sense as we keep stepping through the template, I hope. But as I said earlier, NRCS has got data, and I'm sure our partners do as well. This map, which I know can't be seen with much detail, has a bunch of colored splotches on it. It details the scope and extent of practices applied by Farm Bill program between the years of 2008 and 2018 across the state of Montana. If you focus in on Carter County, things become a little bit easier to see. Over the last 10 years, EQIP, conservation security, stewardship, and our conservation technical assistance dollars have covered a fair bit of the landscape in the county. But to get at the type of information needed to characterize conservation activity, we need to know how many acres have been approved or have been improved by things like prescribed grazing. What types of enhancements under CSP and stewardship have been applied and where, and whether or not conservation technical assistance resulted in conservation on the ground, and that one can be fairly hard to get at. So we have data, we're going to try to pull it together, but we need more to describe what conservation has occurred and what remains to be addressed. And in that, it gives us a description of how we can work together to focus on future conservation. All right, section 4. Natural resource problems and desired future outcomes. This is really where the planning rubber meets the road. It's where the LRP will flesh out each resource concern to which focused conservation will be applied over the time span of the plan. And by flesh out, we mean the scope of each targeted resource concern, the impact of each problem on the environment and people of the county, as well as what's been done in the past and which partners may be able to help achieve our desired future conditions. Section 4 is where the plan talks about resource trend changes over time. So you recall that section 2, which was the inventory piece, describes conditions in the county as they exist today, or the date when the long-range plan was written. But in section 4, we need to talk about changes to resource conditions over time. How have problems changed over time and why? What are the causal or driving factors that are directing resource condition trend lines in one direction or another? And sometimes maintaining a resource trend line is as beneficial as reversing a declining condition. So all good plans need an honest treatment of critical uncertainties. It's okay to guess why certain resource problems are occurring in a county, but to focus conservation on those problems and be able to describe the outcomes or benefits of conservation dollars applied, we need a quantitative understanding of cause and effect. If uncertainties exist, what data are needed to scope the problem, and where can we get the answers we need? Each long-range plan will have a clearly stated desired future condition or sets of conditions by resource problem that will connect to the vision and mission statement presented in section 1. So here each targeted resource concern will be presented, and the future condition of the county when the problems are addressed will be detailed. Many of the targeted resource problems are going to have had some conservation applied in the past. So we talk about, here's where we'll talk about what percent has been fixed and what percent remains to be addressed until we have moved the conservation needle in the right direction for that problem, and then move on, focus on the next set of problems. All right, I see a pop-up here. Robert Ray, limitations to natural resource problems and desired conditions, 5-year horizon. Financial limitations, landowner. Yes, I see what you're getting at, Robert. And so my answer to your question is this. It's one thing to start out with a planning horizon that is 20 years in the future that covers everything down to the last misplaced manure pile in the county. All right. I don't think we can start going in that direction right out of the chute. Obviously, there's a lot of questions as to how is this going to occur. And for the time being, we are bringing that planning horizon closer in, you know, so that we, I guess one way to put it would be, you know, we can start with some baby steps on this. You know, we can hit the low-hanging fruit. We can take care of the things that, you know, we know are problems that we have proven solutions to, and we have a host of, you know, ready, willing, and able landowners and ready, willing, and able partners that are willing to take part in programs as well as contribute to the activity. I think personally, you know, that as we go on, and I mentioned earlier that this is an adaptive management process, you know, we're going to, in some cases, with some of these resource concerns, I think we're going to start talking about longer horizons, right? But as time goes into the future, the funding estimates go way up. And I think part of this will be covered a little bit later. I think I've got a slide here in the deck that'll go at it a bit. But we've got to be realistic with this. And part of that realism with respect to a selection of a planning horizon really does come down to financial limitations. So I hope that answers your question. If not, type another one back in there and I'll come back to it. All right, so we do need to get some clearly identified metrics here. This is really critical. They should be hopefully in the same units or words used to describe the baseline resource condition. So explaining all of this in the same sort of conservation currency is essential. Again, most importantly, because it helps us describe the outcome of dollars applied and allows us to explain how far we've moved the needle from the baseline situation to a future condition that is much better. And section 4 should culminate in a list of well-defined objectives that will help NRCS and partners achieve each goal component of a desired future condition. We need to know how many years, who will be involved, and what help will be needed to get where we want to go. See another dialog box here. Mr. Oki typed in a whole bunch of stuff. Okay. I don't know if you guys can all see this, but I'll expand it here. Cooperative data sharing agreements regarding this request to define the baseline condition. Well, I get where I understand, Mark, I do. I think that we can step into that as necessary down the road. But at least for now, it's kind of like our data. When we report certain types of conservation data that come out of the dollars that we apply, a lot of that stuff is scrubbed, right? It doesn't go down to a parcel number and who did what. So I think relative to talking about a county, according to a set of criteria against which we describe a baseline condition, we can be specific without being descriptive of exactly where things are right now. If anything, the targeted implementation plans, that's going to be a very smaller definition, geographically speaking, of where we're going to apply conservation dollars. So appreciate that. Appreciate the question. Understand the issue. For now, definitely it'll be recorded, and we'll have to return to that one. You make a good point. So we're, like I said at the beginning, we're learning new things. We're coming up against questions like this where we go, I don't know. We'll have to figure that one out. So I'm going to parking lot that one for the time being. And thank you for putting that. And again, you can flame me in the chat if you don't like the answer. All right, so let's see, where was I? Talked about, money. Yes, so it all coming back to the money. What amount of financial assistance is going to be needed for each goal to realize the desired future condition? By this we mean the total amount, a calibrated estimate of the amount of money that's needed to move the needle. We won't be able to do this alone, NRCS won't, but we will come up with a number of solutions against which funds can be leveraged to realize some measurable gains. So Jerry will talk a lot more about the money here in a bit, but I'd point out that one aspect of this new approach to conservation delivery may be that it's more advantageous to leveraging funding because of predictability. Instead of working with a range of practices to address a magnitude of resource concerns across the state, and on funding something like 1 out of every 3 general equip apps that come through the door, partners will know that NRCS is focusing in for the next, and these are just examples, this isn't reality, for the next 3 years in Bighorn County on annual invasive grass eradication, or the next 5 years in Broadwater County on conifer encroachment. When we go into this, when everybody knows where we're headed and what we're doing, it might help syncopate funding opportunities and bring more weight to bear, on problems elsewhere. All right. Section 5, we're getting through this. And finally, and here it is. So here we get a prioritized list of natural resource problems and desired outcomes. It comes out of Section 4. So full disclosure here, we need to ensure that what we're doing with NRCS funding supports our mission and vision, right? It's a threshold determination authorities thing. But prioritization and ranking also needs to consider a host of other factors. What's the local NRCS and partner capacity to deliver the types of conservation actions outlined as problems? If technical specialists aren't available in the county to do a specific type of conservation, then that desired outcome should move down the priority list. Also, have community values and expectations been factored into the prioritization routine? There's some other factors to consider. Cost feasibility. What legislation, regulations, or other sideboards are out there that affect conservation delivery, and that's usually from a timeline perspective. Do some of the resource problems identified meet other national, state, or local initiatives? Can we approach critical mass by prioritizing certain actions? And importantly, how, not if, but how were local interests and partners tied in to decisions that produced a prioritized list of conservation problems and desired future outcomes? So a group of resource managers and ologists and producers can sequester themselves in a room for a few days and come up with a workable long-range plan. The plans without tactics to achieve actions are just a wish list. So how did the LRP authors determine that producers and partners are ready, willing, and able to participate and contribute to the elements of the plan and achievement of the desired future outcomes? We need ready and willing landowners to participate in conservation actions, enable partners to help with capacity, and hopefully some funding down the road. So we're here to Section 6. There's a couple other things I wanted to say before I turn it over to you, Jerry. And conceptually, I've tried to come up with a few things to kind of understand how all this fits together. It's clear as mud to us, right? We know what we're doing, Jerry. But maybe this will help. So if you consider this brown block, and it might be gray, means it's a good chunk of healthy, stable Montana soil. Locally led conservation has been and will continue to be the foundation of what we do. Tom Watson has planted the seed of focused conservation, and in the next couple of years, a new crop of conservation trees will grow across the state. The main structural element of those trees will be long-range plans developed by harvesting a ground-level perspective of what's going on in each county with assistance from partners and facilitation by NRCS. So over time, these trees will blossom with a host of tips that will one day bear fruit as they're funded. So there's a couple of other ways to go about this. I think that helps me maybe to kind of think about structurally how this all fits together. Before I close out, I wanted to cover a couple of deadlines that are detailed in our bulletin that you guys either have now or will get after this webinar. Focused conservation will require long-range plans that set the background for funding instruments. These are the tips that Jerry's going to cover. We started the process in 19 with a few approved tips in counties where there are no final long-range plans. But things are going to change and hard deadlines have been set. That's what the bulletin's about. By December 31st, 2019, long-range plans have to be completed in any county for which a tip is submitted for fiscal year 2020 funding. And by December 31st of 2020, long-range plans must be completed for every county in Montana. And this will allow us to be fully implemented in focused conservation for fiscal year 2020 and beyond. So in summary, long-range plans will present a vision of collaborative, effective land stewardship through description of the baseline resource conditions, a detailed analysis of past conservation efforts, and descriptions of desired future outcomes for resource problems. These plans will outline a prioritized list of resource concerns and quantifiable solutions from which tips can be generated for funding consideration. And it's critical to remember that this is still, I'm going to harp on this again, it's still locally led, a collaborative conservation with NRCS facilitating a new process and delivery mechanism. As Jerry said earlier, there must be a clear line of sight between problems outlined in the long-range plan and solutions presented in the funding proposals, tips. And finally, focus is a part of the name of our new approach to conservation in Montana. It's also a directive. For those of you that will take part in long-range planning with an eye toward future tips, we encourage you to continually ask yourself, is this focused enough? Especially as you work through sections 4 and 5 of the long-range plan. And that's what I have to say on long-range planning. I'm checking, I don't see any new questions. So Terry, I believe if you can switch it back over to Jerry, we'll ride this on out to the end.
Sounds good. Thanks so much, Cale. And Jerry, 1 second, and we will switch over to you. All right, you should be on and able to share your screen there, Jerry. Can folks hear me? We're trying to switch over here to Jerry, and then are we showing Jerry's screen or Cale's?
Hey Terry, this is Tom. I think Cale's presentation is still on, and if Jerry is talking,
okay,
and can hear this, we can't hear him.
Yep. Okay. Hang on 1 second. I should be able to switch back over to Jerry. I just got a slightly confusing message here, so trying to make sure.
I see what it is.
Doing the right thing. Shows. Jerry, where are you?
Hang on, I'm coming. Trying to get there.
Well, I think I am showing Cale's screen still, though, because I think there you are. Okay, so Jerry is presenting now.
But can you?
Okay, it says we're showing your screen.
I hope so.
And it looks like we are.
Are you seeing my screen?
Yep. Are we back to what is a tip? What does a tip look like?
We're back to what is a tip. And so before I answer that, I want to go back to Chris Evans' question about conservation technical assistance. Evidently was muted too while we were trying to find my screen. Our field offices still offer conservation technical assistance that are not tied to financial assistance dollars. That's what we do. That's what we've done since inception. That's what we still do today. Don't think anything's going to change just based on us having a Montana-focused conservation effort. One of the things it will do, however, is if there is a tip in a county, targeted implementation plan, and we are working in that county in that plan, then I'm assuming that's where we're going to prioritize our workload and where we're going to work at the most, but it doesn't mean we're not going to help folks that walk through the door. One of the reasons that we want people to walk through the door and ask for our technical assistance, it may be another way and help us find out what kind of resource concerns that need to be treated throughout that local community. If you got a number of people walking through the door that's having some issues with range health or having some issues with irrigation efficiency, that would be a clue for me as a DC that I might need to be talking with my partners, the conservation district, other people that are associated with the local working group, so that we can start focusing or looking at maybe we should start trying to develop a targeted implementation plan to address that resource concern that those particular individuals are coming through the door asking us for technical assistance help. So that's one way that we'll be able to help to develop targeted implementation plans, is by those folks coming through the door asking for our technical assistance. And so hopefully, Chris, that answered some of your question, and if you have some more, just let me know, and we'll try to answer it even a little bit better than that. Targeted implementation plan. This Montana Focused Conservation effort is derived from two different documents, or a couple of different documents. The Long Range Plan, which is the vision for that county for a 5-year period. It identifies resource concerns, partners, several different things, as Cale outlined in his template for us to be able to draw from. And so I just want to go through what is a TIP, and basically what does a TIP look like. A TIP is a detailed description of a specific, I want to emphasize, specific natural resource concern that a local partnership is proposing to solve over the course of a few years. That local partnership could be the conservation district, could be any number of partners. Each TIP follows from and provides more detail about one of the resource concerns that's described in the field office's long-range plan. And the TIP should make a clear and compelling case as to why we, the NRCS, and others, our partners, should invest in the solution to treating that resource concern. And so what does a TIP look like? This is basically an outline of what we think should be in a TIP. We haven't put a whole lot of sideboards and given a whole lot of guidance as to what a TIP should look like. We don't want to put anybody in a box, but we do or need certain information as we go forward in this Montana Focused Conservation effort. So we do need some kind of basic outline as to what a TIP has in it. First thing obviously would be a project name and then a location. If it is a targeted implementation plan and we're doing a focused effort, then there should be some type of geographic targeted area where this conservation will be implemented at. Also should provide a short goal statement or a problem statement, and should focus on a particular priority resource concern. And then it should have an overview and background information, and that should be what is the purpose and need for this targeted implementation plan, and then answer the question, why is it important to do it now? There needs to be a problem statement. That should be, what is the specific issue or resource concern? Why is it a concern? Where is it occurring at in the county? What are the causes of the problem, and what is the extent of the problem? How much of this particular concern is out there? There also should be some goals and objectives identified in the TIP. What are the locally defined desired future conditions? What do we want it to look like when we get through? What needs to be done to solve the problem? If it's targeted towards not just weeds, then what practices need to be implemented and what partners need to be involved to help us solve that problem? What is the goal of the targeted implementation plan? What outcomes are we trying to achieve? How will progress towards the desired future conditions be measured? And what are the expected outputs and outcomes? How many acres are we going to treat? Different things like that. There also should be some alternatives in there. What alternatives are there for solving the problem? Give us a summary of those alternatives. Describe what happens if no action is taken. If we don't do anything, here's what we think is going to take place. Give you an example, Ventonata. We have a Ventonata TIP that has been approved. What happens if we don't do anything in that particular area? Well, I think the obvious answer is that Ventonata is going to spread. Another thing we need to be asking, are there NEPA considerations? Do our partners need NEPA to be completed before any kind of funding could be provided? Proposed solutions and actions. What is the proposed solution? And then why is that the preferred solution? What information about the solution must be considered to meet the objectives? What are the benefits, costs for the implementation? If we're going to do this many acres of herbaceous weed control, what's the cost for that? What conservation action, practices, projects are needed to solve the problem? Ventonata, I think one of the things that practices that we would need to implement in order to solve that problem would be herbaceous weed control. That's one of the practices that we offer here at the NRCS. Partnerships and other funding sources. Who needs to be involved in making the solution happen? Who are the partners in the effort and who will need to participate to make it happen? Just to give you an example of partners. We were talking about vent and nada. There could be a proposal submitted about some other herbaceous weed where you're involving the weed district and have them, they say, we're going to treat 2,000 acres of this vent and nada, and NRCS is going to address through our conservation practice and practice standards, we're going to be able to treat 3,000 acres through this TIP. And that would be a way for a targeted implementation plan or TIP to leverage dollars that NRCS has and also the weed control district has to treat that specific resource concern. And what landowner participation rate is necessary to solve the problem? And what role, technical and financial contribution, will each partner bring to the solution? How much is the solution going to cost the partnership? And what is the NRCS piece of that as well? Implementation, what additional planning needs to be completed to implement the projects? What is the time frame for this project or series of projects? Is it going to take you a year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years to reach that desired outcome? How much technical assistance and staff time from the NRCS and the partners is needed to implement the project? How and where are projects practices prioritized and sequenced? How are the implementation efforts going to be coordinated and managed? And has there been any marketing and outreach? Is there a plan for marketing and outreach? How much of that needs to be done? Do we need to have local meetings? What needs to be done to make sure that the word gets out that we're doing this targeted implementation plan, or is it going to help us implement this targeted implementation plan? And so one of the biggest pieces of the puzzle, and the one that everybody seems to be concerned about the most, I think, is the funding. And I know we've been focused on funding for a lot of years, and one of the things that I would like to see or hope to see coming out of this Montana focused conservation effort is that focus shifts from the funding to treating natural resource concerns that are a priority to that local community, based on us engaging that local community through the local working group process. And so use the funding to treat the concern, not use the funding to find the concern. And so I hope that's where we go. And so we equip funding. National priorities are still going to exist. There are several of them, and I'll show you in the next slide where those are. Montana general funding and special project funding will go to the highest ranking TIPs. But one of the things that we hope to do with TIPs is to be able to use those TIPs as a basis to request dollars from national headquarters and to also engage our partners to seek funding through the Regional Conservationist Partnership Program. RCPP will be, I think, an excellent mechanism for our partners to submit a project proposal to help speed up the implementation of a targeted implementation plan. And so here's a slide of what it looks like as far as our funding goes for EQIP. These numbers are made up. They're not the real thing. So I don't want you to get wrapped around the axle about how much dollars are here, because this is not, I promise you, this is not 2019 funding. It's numbers that I just put in here. And if you look at the top half of this spreadsheet, we have SGI, that stands for Sage Grouse Initiative. There's a SGI General, there's a SGI Cropland Seeding, and a SGI Conifer Encroachment. Montana NRCS gets so many dollars from national headquarters that are targeted for Sage Grouse Initiative. And if you'll notice, it's targeted for that Sage Grouse Initiative. We've been doing targeted approach to conservation for years. We've been doing it at the national level through initiatives. We've also been doing it here in the state as well. And so this is nothing new. It's just maybe new to how we're doing some of our funding in Montana, but we've been doing targeted approach to conservation for years. Sage Grouse Initiative is one example of that. And so we basically have 3 different funding pots for sage grouse. We have the generals, we have cropland seeding, and conifer encroachment. We roughly get anywhere between $4 million and $4.5 million dollars for sage grouse initiative any given year. in this example have $4.3 million that we have received based on this example for sage grouse initiative. We split that into 2 buckets, a bucket of general and a bucket of cropland seeding, put $3 million in one, 1.3 in the other. That doesn't mean that those funds can't be moved within each other. I could take some of that money out of general, put it into cropland seeding if it was needed, or vice versa. Now, I can't take the money out of that sage grouse initiative and put it in anything else you see on that page. It has to be used specifically for sage grouse initiative EQIP contracts. Can't use it for anything else. If I don't use all of that $4.3 million, or we don't use all of that $4.3 million here in the state of Montana, I have to send it back to national headquarters. Our money comes in 2 different flavors. One flavor is technical assistance, the other is financial assistance. This chart here shows you financial assistance is what it shows, but there's also technical assistance dollars tied to that. Those technical assistance dollars is what we use to be able to pay our people, district conservationists, soil conservationists, engineers, agronomists, foresters, all of those folks. So when I send financial assistance dollars back to national headquarters because I wasn't able to use them all, or we weren't able to obligate them all, I have to send some technical assistance dollars back with that. And so just wanted you to be aware of that. And if you look down about 4 rows, there's a National Water Quality Initiative, Lower Gallatin. We do have a National Water Quality Initiative project. Once again, it is a targeted or a focused initiative, focused strictly in a specific area in Gallatin County, and it's addressing national water quality issues. There's a certain amount of money that comes from headquarters for that. Once again, can only be used in that specific area, can't be used anywhere else. A pollinator, we get a certain amount of money from headquarters for pollinators, been anywhere from $300,000 to $500,000, depending on the year. That money is just strictly for pollinator projects, specifically pollinator habitat. Now, that is a statewide initiative. We take applications for a certain period of time, and they're specifically for that fund pool, and so we use those dollars for that, even though the geographic area is statewide. There is a 2 Chiefs project currently going on in the state. It's Capital 360 Forestry project. Once again, a targeted approach. There are 3 counties, I believe, that's in this Capital 360 Forestry initiative. We get a certain amount of money for that in any given fiscal year. The example I have here is roughly about $250,000. Once again, that money can be used in that Capital 360, and it can't be used anywhere else. Can't move it up, can't move it down, can't go anywhere else with it. And so those are national initiatives that we have that are targeted. They got specific money, can only be spent somewhere, spent in those specific areas, can't be spent anywhere else. If we'll drop down to the next set of things, you'll see a Montana General EQIP. This is the amount of money that we get in Montana that we would like to think that we can tell you where we get to spend it at, but we can't because there's some places that we have to spend that $11 million that I'm showing here in this example. LRP and BFR in the row down below that is limited resource producer and a beginning farmer or rancher. We are mandated by law and by the Farm Bill to spend 5% of our EQIP funds on limited resource producers and beginning farmers and ranchers. And so we have to set aside those funds and use those specifically for that. Then you'll see the next row down, socially disadvantaged group of funding. We set aside 10% of our funds for that here in Montana. We're only mandated to do 5. And so once again, there's 10% of that 11 million or $1.1 million that we have to set aside and use specifically for those 2 groups. There's another one that's AFO-CAFO, dealing with confined animal feeding operations. This year we set aside $500,000 out of that 11 if we were doing it this way. And I promise you, I'll use the terms that we set it aside this year, and I promise you this is not the money that we have this year. But just as an example, we set aside $500,000 out of that 11 million if we were using this to do our funding with. Organic Initiative is a national initiative. It's one of those initiatives mandated by national headquarters that we have a sign up for. They don't give us any dollars to do that with. We have to take money out of what we call EQIP General to be able to fund those. In this example, I've used $200,000 comes out of that. Our tunnel systems, same thing. National initiative, headquarters says we have to have it. We have to offer a sign up for it, but we have to use our money, EQIP general money, to be able to fund it. National headquarters does not give us a separate pot for that. We also have some energy initiatives. Once again, national initiative. We don't get any money from headquarters. We have to take that money out of our 11 million that you see there. And so as you see, as we go down through these conservation innovation grants, we chose to set aside that amount of money, or we'll choose to or not. Crow Creek is another initiative that's a targeted initiative here within the state. And then you'll see that the other one there is State Office Reserve. We set back or hold back $500,000 for if there is an oversight, somebody used a wrong cost list or needed to modify a contract that has already been obligated, we'll get dollars out of that. That's what we use to modify contracts and to fix any errors that may have been done as we obligate money for those contracts. And so what we'll wind up with is some money left over after we take all of that money off the top. And in this example here, it's $7,355,000. We take that money and we divide it up 4 different ways because we have 4 areas here in the state of Montana: Bozeman, Great Falls, Miles City, and Missoula. And we have a formula whereby we do that, that we use here within the state to divide that money. In this new environment, we've done this in the past. This is the way it's been done. This is the way we do it today. Even going to do it this way under Montana-focused conservation. The difference being is that this year, some of these dollars will be spent and obligated the way we've done it in the past through area fund pools, and also a combination of approved tips. There's 7 tips that have been approved in the state, and there's 4 in the Bozeman area, 3 in the Missoula area. 4 of those have already been uploaded to our website, so you could go there to see them if you wanted to. And so that's where those dollars come from. Through the Montana Focused Conservation effort, Tom has empowered the assistants for field ops in those 4 areas to determine which tips they're going to invest their money in. And so based off of the way we're going to do things in the future is there's going to be a long-range plan. There will be a targeted implementation plan developed out of and in direct line sight to that long-range plan. That targeted implementation plan will come to the state office. It'll be looked at and reviewed by the state leadership team. Then the state leadership team will deem whether it's what we call investment ready or not, or if it's investment ready with a few changes. It's got to go back to the DC to make some changes to it that we want them to either focus more, or the outcomes weren't clearly defined, or for whatever reason it goes back and they have to bring it back and forth until we get it where we want it. And so you have investment ready, you have investment ready with tweaks, and then you have those that just they're not ready and need to be worked on for another year and can be submitted in the next deadline for tips. And the way we want to do this is we would love to be sitting here today, March of 2019, talking about and looking at tips that are going to be funded in 2020. We weren't able to do that this year since it was a transition year. And so we looked at those. They gave DCs, they had a very short turnaround. They did a great job submitting tips. I think there were 18 submitted. We decided that 7 of them were what we would deem to be investment ready, or 8 of them were investment ready. 7 of those, the ACs chose to put money towards, and those are, the announcement went out on March the 1st for applications for those 7 with a deadline of March the 29th. And that's pretty much how we do our funding. I've got some numbers that I'd like to throw out there to you because a lot of folks are concerned about, well, we're not going to be able to meet the needs of all of our people to sign up for EQIP. Last year, we obligated 344 contracts. And so we didn't meet the needs of everybody last year because we had roughly somewhere in the neighborhood of 1,200 applications. I looked this morning in the software that we use to put our applications in. We currently have 1,100 EQIP applications in ProTrax, the software we use to track those in. And if we do the math and say we're going to fund based off of past history, 350 of those, that leaves 750 applicants that won't receive any financial assistance at all. Roughly, we'd be funding 32%, and we would be not funding 68%. And so there's a whole bunch of people that we don't fund already. I know there's a couple of counties in the state last year that didn't have any EQIP contracts funded, doing it the way we've been doing it in the past. And those are going to exist whether we do Montana focused conservation or if we were funding the way we've always funded. And so those folks are going to be there. I wish we had the money to be able to fund 1,100 applications, but then I would need an army, or Tom would need an army of NRCS employees here in the state of Montana to be able to meet all that need. And so there's going to be some heartburn, and I understand that there's going to be a heartburn about being able to fund all of these folks that are out there, and we just can't do it. And because of the fact that we can't do it, is the reason that we're headed into this and transitioning into this Montana focused conservation effort. We can't fund everybody. We can't meet everybody's needs. And so let's do it in a way that treats a resource concern that's been identified by a local community, target our efforts in that local community anywhere from 3 to 5 years with some consistent funding to make an impact in that community, not only economically through funding through EQIP, but also an impact on that community environmentally by being able to treat that natural resource concern, that priority resource concern that local work group has identified. And so like we said, 19 is a transition year, and fiscal year 20 will be full implementation. Yes?
Oh, Jerry, this is Terry. I just wanted to point out that we have some questions that have been hanging out in the chat box for a little while.
Yeah, I can't see the chat box when I'm presenting. So.
Oh, okay. But yeah, I can. So just let me know when you're ready and I can read those
Kale
off
says
for
I
you.
can. I just didn't know. Kale says I can. I just didn't know I can.
Oh, okay. We're almost to questions anyway. All right, hang on. I'll let you finish up and then we can do the questions.
Well, I think I'm pretty much there.
All right. Well, can you see those questions starting with Constanza von der Palen, or do you want me to? I can just read them out too.
Well, hang on. I'll get to that screen if I can. Here's this one right there. Is that me? Nope, that ain't it.
Yeah, I can read them off for you too. That's no problem. You want to just take them as
that'd be.
Yeah, so the last one, this is going back a little bit to the framework of the long range plans. Constanza von der Palen was asking, she said, focused conservation makes sense, but 5 years might just be the time folks in an area start to open up to a new norm or technique. Suggest you be open to true long-term follow-up in promising areas.
Well, one of the things about a long range plan is it's not a static document. It's a dynamic document, living document that hopefully is not created and put on a shelf and then 5 years later picked back up and looked at again. We do understand that we're hoping this thing builds over time. Is exactly what we're wanting this thing to do, and I can see it doing it. So it is we expect our DCs to go back and review those on a yearly basis, and specifically as it relates to them holding local work group meetings. If they're holding local work group meetings and new resource concerns are coming up that aren't addressed in that long range plan, then a tweak to that long range plan will need to be made.
All right, and our next question came from Mark Oakey, asking, how can a local watershed group, nonprofit, water quality district, or state or federal agency partner become involved with the local working group? And I will say this is something we've got. MWCC sent an email out about this a little while ago, and I'm happy to forward that on to people. But Jerry, if you could answer that right now briefly, that would be great too.
Sure. We would encourage the local watershed group, the nonprofit, the water quality district, or whoever it might be to contact that local district conservationist in that local field office and request to be part of that locally led effort would be what we would want those folks to do. Because that's what we would do. If you called here asking to be involved in some locally led effort, we would refer you back to that district conservationist that is over that local office there.
Okay, and then we've got another question from Kelsey Malloy. How adaptive are TIPs? Can field offices write additional ones after a few years? Just wondering if offices will be able to respond to new resource concerns as they come up, such as soil acidification, new invasive weeds, etc.
Definitely. We would, one of the things, and I know we probably don't talk about this enough, a field office is not limited to one tip. They can have multiple tips. That's what we want them to have, multiple tips. The tip is just a mechanism for them to be able to request funding to treat a resource concern. If there's more than one resource concern that's been identified in that long-range plan, our hope would be, and what we would instruct our folks at the local field office to do, is you need to be writing tips for those. We have multiple tips. Even in this transition year, there's a field office that's got more than one tip in it. And so, yes, the more than one tip is definitely something that we would like to see.
All right, and then we have another here from Robert Ray asking, how do you determine that a contract is consistent with a tip? And then a follow-up to that, don't applicants have numerous requests that may not address the needs identified in a tip? What happens then?
Ask me that first one again, Terry.
Yep, no problem.
I don't see it on my screen, so.
Yeah, this one looks like it only went to me, which is why you're not seeing it. But it just says, how do you determine that a contract is, quote, consistent with a tip? And then the second kind of seems like a follow-up to that is, don't applicants have numerous requests? All right, I think that's part of it. But yeah, how do you determine that a contract is consistent with a tip? Okay. And then
Gotcha.
So maybe just start with that one.
So we have screening tools that we will use to, when folks come in and apply for EQIP, we will take those applications and we screen them. Just to give you an example, a screening question could be as simple as, is this applicant located in a targeted implementation plan area? Would be one way to make sure that that applicant is associated with that targeted implementation plan there. And then to make sure that a contract addresses the needs of that primary resource concern. In a targeted implementation plan, we are asking our local DCs to write that thing and then tell us how they're going to treat that resource concern. I don't know the number of conservation practices that we offer here in the state of Montana. It's over 100. They're contained in our field office technical guide, which is located on the website. You can link to our field office technical guide. And so those practices are, what will happen in targeted implementation plan, just to give you an example, vent and nada. One of the practices, and there's not a whole lot of practices that we would use to, or suggest be used to treat vent and nada. One of the practices would be herbaceous weed control. It's 314, we have codes, 315, we have codes for these. And so in that targeted implementation plan, it would have in there that I want to treat this many acres of the resource concern is vent and nada, so we need to do it with herbaceous weed control. And we're not going to offer all 100 of those practices in that targeted implementation plan. It'll just be 4 or 5 practices that are available to that applicant in that targeted implementation plan to treat that identified priority resource concern. Hopefully that answered Robert's question.
Okay. And then the next one we've got from Bailey Sorey. How does one find out what the priorities are at the local offices? And I assume they mean the local NRCS office.
Hopefully that will be easy to do over time. Since we're just getting started in this process and we haven't we've got a deadline, but it's in the future. for DCs to have a long-range plan. Those long-range plans are going to be loaded on our website, but then they also would be available there in the local office. And until those get loaded on the website and until those get written up, my suggestion would be to talk to the local district conservationist there, who is our person, our boots on the ground there, to let you know what they've identified, at least through some of the local work group meetings that they have been having here recently.
Okay, and our next
and our goal is, Terry, is for all 53 field offices to have a long-range plan, and that long-range plan be available and accessible to anyone through our Montana NRCS website.
All right. The next question seems almost a little MWCC focused. We've got a question from Sunny Hakes Napton asking, what will be the strategy for, quote, telling the story that results from the tips? And I'll take a stab at this and then maybe let, Jerry or Cale jump in. But I do know that one of the areas that MWCC is trying to partner with NRCS and with local watershed and conservation organizations is to help with that very aspect. At some point, Jerry or Cale mentioned, talking the meeting, the outreach component, that, there's going to need to be a lot of community outreach and developing these tips. And then in terms of telling success stories or telling the story of how these projects are working on the ground, impacts and benefits to landowners. And I think that that's an area where the MWCC Watershed Fund with our capacity building funding could step in to help local organizations and partnerships really do that outreach work in the first place, and then also tell the stories of how things are working, what are the benefits to landowners for this. So I definitely think that's a role that MWCC could play. Jerry or Cale, or Tom for that matter, if he's still on, did you have anything to say on that question? The strategy for telling the stories resulting from tips?
Yeah, this is Cale. The way that it's intended right now.
Cale, I can't hear you very well. I don't know if others can.
I'm right here in front of Jerry's computer. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me? Hello?
You've gone quiet again.
Can you hear us now?
Yes.
Because we were right here in front of Jerry's computer.
Weird.
It is weird. Yeah, I'm getting closer to Jerry than he probably wants me to be. Yeah. So I think the idea would be that when we go through the planning process to talk about what's going on in the county and define the scope and extent of a resource problem, that a tip will obviously be tiered off of that, be specific to a narrower list of practices that will, move the needle, address that conservation problem. And between the beginning of focused conservation, which will be reflected in the long-range plans, we'll know how big it was of a problem at the beginning. And as we throw tips at these, we'll incrementally be able to describe how we've addressed and to what percent we've addressed the resource problem identified in the long-range plan. So, that baseline condition as set forth in the long-range plan is an essential piece in describing down the road how much conservation has been achieved.
Is somebody else trying to talk there?
Yeah, Terry, this is Tom. I think maybe to sum it up is what I'm asking is for, through the locally led process, you all to define what the outcome is, and not me. I don't want to define, our priorities in all of our field offices and decide what's important. So through that process, you all are going to decide what the outcome is that need to be addressed. And with that, you also define what it takes to get there. And once we get there, then that's the time that we need to celebrate that, and we need to talk about the successes. We need to talk about the challenges that we have. Not every tip is likely going to end up in doing exactly what we thought or what we wanted, and we need to learn from those as we go. But I think the key and important part of this is when an outcome is defined locally through the locally led process, you're also going to define when we get there, and that is what part of the tip is.
All right.
That area, once that desired outcome is reached, Tom has talked about, it's time to have a barbecue. Then start telling the story of the success that we had in that local group, local area, local geographic area, based on input from the local community, doing a collaborative, working together collaboratively to solve that resource concern or that resource issue.
Yeah, again, and that's something that I think MWCC at that point could step in, working with the local organizations on the ground to do that work. So, and we've got another question here from Carl Christians. Will there be an outreach effort to producers, landowners, and partners to invite them to the local working group?
Yes, that should be taking place at the local level through our local DC. And so that should be an ongoing process. We understand that all local working groups are not created equal, if we just be honest about it. Some do better than others. There's numerous reasons as to why, but some are better than others. We hope that through this focused conservation effort that we can get all our local work groups up to working and being involved and functioning. And so through our local DCs, that outreach effort is being made, meetings are being held, and hopefully as we continue through transitioning into this Montana focused conservation effort and through the next few years, that the local work group and our outreach to those and the size of those will continue to grow, and the input that we receive from them will be even better and better.
Yeah, and again, I just want to stress too that as MWCC has this capacity building funding that's out there for a watershed fund right now, that is something that's available to watershed and conservation organizations. If, obviously we're hoping that all the local working groups are reaching out and the district conservationists are there and reaching out, but in those cases where, you might have to make a special effort in your community to get voices heard, there is funding available for holding community meetings, and for doing a little more outreach yourself in cases where that is needed. We have another question from Chris Evans. In the 20 years since I've been with the CD, we've had 5 state conservationists, which leads me to ask the question, in 4 or 5 years, which is the average, what happens when we get a new state conservationist? And if that state conservationist doesn't like this method, what happens to all the work that's been done?
Well, let me answer that, please. So this is Tom, and I can appreciate that. I can't speak to the fact that that others have walked in these moccasins before me. I can't, and I don't know what I can't tell you what the future will hold. But I'm pretty sure that the work that we do today and the work we do in the future through this effort will stand on its own. Everybody needs to recognize, and Chris, to your question of 20 years, and there's many people that have many years of experience. Our agency is going through unprecedented changes every day at a rate of which I'm not sure I've seen in my 28 years happen. So there's no doubt there are changes on the horizon that we don't even know about. But I think for as long as I have the helm, and I don't know that it's 5 years, it might be 10 years. That, again, the work we do today, just like the work that we've done in the past, stands on its own.
Okay, our next and looks like our last question here in the chat box from Cascade Conservation District. What if your partners are limited financially? Will the tip still be a valid proposal?
Yes, the tip would still be a valid proposal. We do understand that some of our partners are limited financially. Some of those may even be conservation districts. And so we would hope that they could do some kind of in-kind contribution, whether it be helping with outreach, various number of other things that would be considered to be in-kind. But yes, it still would be a valid tip proposal.
All right. Do we have any other questions? Anybody want to hop on with final questions before we start to wrap up? Okay, it looks like we don't have any questions. I would like to, this is again Terry from MWCC. I would like to pose one question, just in turn, and this is just to everyone on the call, both everyone who's attending as well as folks at NRCS. What are some next steps that we might take, or some follow-ups that MWCC could help with? Is there something that I or that MWCC could help facilitate with these discussions and the long range planning and tips going forward? Oh, and just a point of.
So Terry, let me jump in there, and I'm sure there's a lot more smarter people in the room and around the state. But I think from NRCS's perspective, not only you, I think when I think of the effort moving forward, I think about our longest standing conservation partner, and that's conservation districts across the state. And we're involved in many partnerships today, whether it's with an NGO like TNC or Pheasants Forever, or a joint venture, NWCC or conservation districts or MACD. I think the help moving forward is making sure that everybody understands and making sure that the word gets out. And if you have any questions or you need clarification, then let's not make a bunch of assumptions, and let's not assume things that maybe aren't really real. Let's figure out what that is and engage in us, and we'll try to get the best answer we possibly can, recognizing that we are developing this as we go. I didn't throw a playbook on the table and said, we got to do exactly this. We are doing this deliberately as we go, and I'm confident that there are going to be a few missteps made along the way. Not intentionally, not purposefully, but just because we don't know what we don't know. So we are trying to be very vigilant in how we move forward, thus giving this year a transition year to get some things started and get some successes and get a feel for it, all the while planning for the future. And I recognize that's not an easy ask or an easy task, but if we don't know where we're going, we're never going to get there. And so I think that is, Terry, one of the things that everybody on the call, partners that in moving forward can help with is, if you're confused, ask the question. Maybe don't assume the worst. Just let's work through what that looks like, and we'll do our best to get the answer. And I want to thank you, Terry, and all of the partners, conservation districts and coordination councils and whomever else that have taken nearly 2 hours to engage in this process today.
Yeah, thanks for that, Tom. And likewise, same thing. I mean, I just would encourage everyone on this call to reach out if you have additional questions, input, thoughts on the process. Reach out to your local district conservationist, reach out to Jerry or Tom or Cale, reach out to myself if I can be of help. And definitely let's keep this conversation going. And just really quick, I thought we were all done with questions, but we just got a few more in. One clarification question: which comes first, the LRP or the TIP? And my understanding is that the LRP, the long range plan, is the basis for the TIPs. Is that correct?
That's the idea.
Okay. And then our next question from Rachel Frost: do partners in TIPs need their own long range plans?
I'll cover that. You know, the long range plan is.
Get a little closer to the mic, Kale.
Get inside this computer, I guess I have to. The long range plan, we've decided administratively is for a county. And it talks about, again, resource problems and opportunities. So my answer to Rachel's question is no. Partners should, I would hope that would be there to write the long range plan for that county, and that plan will contain, you know, the types of information that we all need to see in there to describe what conservation needs to occur. And to address those needs, the tips will come into play. So the plans are for the landscape, right? And then they include the human aspect of that, because of course we need people to be ready, willing, and able to do conservation. Okay, so that's the way I see it, and I hope it made sense. And actually, I guess while I've got the mic and it's working, to your question earlier, Terry, about what MWCC can bring to bear on this, I mentioned earlier, you know, the resource inventory part, and it was a question that was posed earlier, but was I guess addressed by something I'd said. If we could come up with a clearinghouse for planning documents that have been developed across the state by Watershed, you know, in the past, that would be helpful. I spent some time on your website. If it's there, I didn't find it. But something like that would be very useful. We've got, again, a growing assets folder here on SharePoint, and then of course that's not accessible to everybody, but you know, as a place to gather information that can be useful for long range plan materials, that is something that is going to be tremendously valuable as all these different entities, or you know, our different counties start trying to develop a long range plan. Again, because we don't want this to be an exhaustive process. We're not looking for a dissertation or a thesis here. We just need, you know, we need a description of what's going on in the county and what's been done and what remains to be done and who's out there to help. And you know, I mean, that's what the plan is about. So any text that you can provide would be tremendously valuable.
Thanks for that, Kale. That actually, yeah, that's a great idea. It would be, yeah, that's a great idea. And that sort of goes to my, one of my final thing I was just going to let people know is that I will be sending out an email. It's probably going to go out tomorrow, with a link to the recording of this webinar, as well as I can link the long range planning template to that. As well as if there are any other documents. I know Kale sent that bulletin out to everybody ahead of this meeting, but I can attach those documents to that recording so that that's available, and then perhaps developing some kind of repository for other useful documents or examples of long range plans would be a good step going forward. Oh, and I guess that was the last question. Yes, the webinar will be available for viewing later on. Again, I hope to get that up tomorrow morning along with some additional information on that page. So it seems like we're wrapping up. Did anybody from NRCS want to say anything real quick to wrap up before I end us? All right. Well, hearing that. Oh, is somebody there?
Terry, I just want to thank you as well. We here at the NRCS are very appreciative of Montana Watershed Coordination Council and you being able to organize and put together this webinar today to help us get the information out about Montana Focused Conservation. And just thank you and Montana Watershed Coordination Council for what you do.
Thanks, Jerry. And thank you to all of you NRCS folks for taking the time to put this on. And thank you everyone who attended. We still have 56 people hanging on here on the line and out of everyone who is here. And I really appreciate everyone who is on this webinar taking the time to find out more about this process. I really hope that you will all take this to heart and become engaged in your local working groups, reach out to your DCs and your conservation districts. Certainly reach out to MWCC if we can help with anything in this process. Yeah, thanks again, everybody, and appreciate it. Everyone, have a great afternoon.